First, let me thank you all for coming here today. This is a special meeting, a first for Oregon, and a chance for you to share your ideas for Oregon's future. Oregonians like to get involved in the issues facing their state. You don't want your government to hand down solutions from on high, and you won't be sold an easy answer. Historically, we've had a hands-on government in Oregon, and citizens like yourself have had a chance to have their say and to shape the decisions. That's why I invited you here tonight. The decisions that face us need your attention. This is the largest effort to involve citizens in their government that has ever been tried in Oregon and possibly any place in the entire country. Tonight you'll be talking with your neighbors, with me, and with Oregonians from around the state. We are using a new technology to bring all of you into this discussion. It's called EdNet, and it works as a two-way broadcast. It's a great new tool for communication, very much like a two-way radio. So let's first see how it works and try it out now. So let me try down in Cottage Grove at Cottage Grove High School. Are you there?
This is Bob Proctor at Cottage Grove High School, and yes, we are here.
Great. And now let me try in Newport, the Hatfield Marine Science Center. Are you there?
This is Mike Schoberg in Newport. We're here.
I love it when they answer. And next at Eastern Oregon State College in La Grande, can you check in with us?
Yes, this is Marlene Harris, and we're here.
Good. That's how it works. Now, I will tell you there could be a glitch or two as we use the technology tonight, but I think basically we're ready to go. This meeting is part of a conversation with Oregon, which is bringing thousands of Oregonians into a discussion about our state's future. We have some important issues to think about, and I'd like to hear your opinions. The answers you give will make a difference in our state for decades to come. We need to think about the future of Oregon. What level of services do we want from our state and local government, and how should we provide those government services? These are very important questions and very difficult questions, and I'd like you to spend your time here tonight in a discussion with me and other Oregonians from around the state. Now, frankly, when we begin to talk to Oregonians about what they want from government and how to pay for it, they seem pretty frustrated. Some people think government doesn't spend their money well. Others worry about how we should pay for services. My first question to you is, how well is state and local government spending your tax dollars? Now, I bet you have some pretty strong ideas about this. So take the next 20 minutes to talk about how well government is doing its job, and I'll be back with you. Well, I hope you had a good discussion, and now I'd like to hear from you. We have over 20 different meetings going on across Oregon tonight, and I'd like to start by calling on 5 of the cities. So let me name those 5 cities first so you'll know in advance who you are. I want to go to Lynn Benton Community College in Albany, to Hermiston at the high school, to Thomas Junior High School in Hillsboro, to the Jackson Educational Service District in Medford, and finally to OIT in Klamath Falls. What I'd like to do is hear from 2 people from each of the 5 sites. And please remember to keep your comments as brief as you can. I want to give lots of people a chance to speak up. So if I do this, that means to wrap up your comments so I can respond and move on to the next person. Now, what do you think about the way state and local governments spend your tax dollars? Let's hear first from Albany. How well is state and local government spending your tax dollars?
Okay. Hello, I'm Lorraine Metz from Albany, Oregon, and we're here discussing your question. Some of the comments we've come up with are, number 1, when we go to the vote, when we vote no, we mean no. And we don't like to come read the paper the next day and find out what we voted for may or may not have passed, but somehow the government gets around it and does what they wanted to do all along. And here we have Dave from Corvallis.
I'm Dave Anderson from Corvallis.
Hi, Dave.
We added a few other things to our talks. One person felt that the wages from government folks ought to be in tune with private industry. Another person felt that government was spending its money pretty efficiently. We also realized that if we want to have reduced budgets, reduced taxes, we have to accept reduced services.
Okay,
Thank
now,
you.
let me see if I can go back and get a couple of clarifications that would help me. The comment about when we vote no, we mean no. I don't understand what that means. I can't think of a case unless you went back about 25 or 30 years ago when the daylight saving time issue was going on. I can't think of a circumstance where we voted on something in Oregon and the law hasn't stayed in effect and been applied. It would help me to understand what the comment means.
Barbara, I'm going to give you Mr. Roberts. It was his comment, and he knows more about it.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Lyle Robertson. I'm from Lebanon. What I'm talking about is when we vote no on a budget, reading the paper where they're going to resubmit it again and vote on it. Mostly I'm talking about county, city budgets. When we vote no, I think it should be no. Not send it back to us like we didn't understand what we're doing. I'm not always against, I'm not always for.
Okay, that helps me to understand it a little better. I thought it was like a ballot measure that had been passed and then we didn't have to abide by the law, and I knew that wasn't true unless it wasn't constitutional, so I was a little confused. You're not going to see a lot of those budgets coming out for a while because Oregon's tax assessment system and taxation system has changed, so you won't see as much of that as you've seen in the past. It generally was done because if a school district didn't have enough of a tax base to operate, they would come back. Most school districts would come back with less, or a local government or city government would come back with less than they had the time before, seeing if they could find a way to get some encouragement to support that local government or schools. But occasionally you would see a district that came back with the same amount they had on the budget the first time, but you're not going to see much of that under the new system, I don't think. Let me move now to Hermiston. How well is state and local government spending your tax dollars? What's your attitude there in Hermiston?
This is Steve Wilcox of Hermiston, and one of our concerns is, are things equitable? Are all portions of government treating all of the state fairly, and are all portions of the state receiving the funding that they should in an equitable manner? And is the bureaucracy eating up more of the state dollar than what it should?
Well, let me take the equity question. That's a really good question, I think one that matters. I have to tell you that basically there is not equity in our tax structure now, just in terms of the structure, and some districts are lucky and they have a lot of very expensive buildings in their district, so that raises a different amount of money and they're able to provide in a way that people can't do in some other parts of the state. So there really is some inequity in the distribution of how the tax structure affects different sizes of communities and different communities. The other thing I would say in terms of how state government spends the money once the money's there, not just the equity of the tax structure, but once it arrives in government, is I'm working very hard to make sure that we really are looking at the state as a whole. Now, that doesn't mean every county is going to get an equal amount of money because their needs are very different. But it means that a program, for instance, the Regional Strategies Program in Economic Development, one of the things we're doing and have been doing now for 3 years is to help local governments and local communities find a way to create new jobs in their communities. So every region has an opportunity to get some funds into their region to help with their local economic development. I think that's the best kind of program we get, where we raise it on a statewide basis but expend it to every region in the state. And I think the more of those kinds of programs we have, the better people are going to feel about how state government works. So, Hermiston, another comment from your area?
This is Karen Bounds in Hermiston, and we're concerned because we feel that because we have a lower population that sometimes our concerns are not addressed by the state. One of our concerns right now is water, and we're very, very much concerned about that, and we wonder how much attention is being paid to that west of the mountains.
Well, I don't think there's an issue that's getting a lot more attention and will over the next few years than the issue of water, no matter where you are in the state. The issue of agricultural needs in terms of water, in terms of cities' needs for water, in terms of fish's needs for water. So I think no matter how you look at the issue of water and where you are in the state, it's going to become a vital and critical issue all over the state. But in terms of, does Hermiston get hurt as well as Portland, or does Lakeview get hurt as well as Eugene? I work hard to make sure they do, and one of the things I do is spend a lot of time out moving around the state to be sure that happens. The other thing we're doing on this EdNet hookup is we're not just hooked up to Eugene and Portland and Salem, we're hooked up to people all over the state, not just big cities, but the smallest of communities in the state. So I think it's very important that we as a state recognize we really are in this together. And the east and west side of the mountains voted differently on ballot measure 5. Basically, the east side said no to ballot measure 5, and a lot of the west side said yes. So we don't always agree on issues, but I think we would all agree that wherever we are in the state, we want Oregon to be healthy. So I hope we can not do us and them, but work on what's good for the state as a whole, and I'm working hard to make that happen, so I hope we can work there. Let me move on to Hillsboro now. How well is state and local government spending your tax dollars?
My name is Jack Steinberg of Hillsboro, and the point that I want to point out is that our penalty for crime in the state is such that even we build one more prison, we still have it full, and we can keep it up to where we have such a thing that the people will not put up with. It costs, I think, about $50,000 a year for each one of these. I used to teach school as a high school principal, and when your kids got out of line, you burned them. Well, the same thing is here. You don't stick your hand on a red-hot stove at one time. In other words, if we had, like in Hong Kong or some of the other Asian countries where they have to deal with power, then we need to have maybe execution for the second felony. Some of these things. In other words, crime is costing us too much when it need not do so. If our children are raised up to, they can't be touched in school. In other words, I'm a sovereign territory. No one can touch me. We have these raised up today. We have our 20 to 35-year-old men abusing their wives and their children. And then along with comes crime. And we set them up in prison, and it's costing way, way too much.
Well, I think we need to be clear that child abuse and spousal abuse are not just 25 and 35-year-old men. It occurs across the age range. I don't think it's anything new to this generation. But there's no question that crime costs a lot. Ignorance costs a lot. People who can't read don't succeed, and then we find them looking for other places to deal with their non-success in school. Kids who are abused tend to be the kids who end up in our prisons. Kids who grow up in households where alcohol and drugs are abused tend to be more likely to end up in our prison system. So there's no question that we have some things we know can cut the crime. Not just the tough sentences, that's part of it, not just the prison time, that's part of it, but how we raise kids, the kind of time we as parents give to them, and the kind of commitment a community has back to those kids. So I think there's things we can do, because crime is a very costly part of how we do government. Let me move back to Hillsboro to see if we've got another comment there in Hillsboro.
Governor Omar Barbarossa here. We have Ms. Laura Minnick.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Laura Minnick from Hillsboro. One of the concerns that we came up with is that we seem to feel that our state government and local governments also are top-heavy in administration. We feel like we're paying for too many layers of bureaucracy, more and more employees, and more benefits for these employees. And it escalates till we have a point where we feel like we're throwing good money after bad. The more money we spend, the more money seems to be required.
Well, let me make a couple of quick comments that I think might help you feel a little bit better. One of the things I said when I became governor was that we need to look at the sort of mid-management part of government and see if we could flatten government a little bit, not have as much money in the mid-management or as many people there. And so the agencies began to look at what they could do. And let me just give you two brief examples. The Oregon State Police looked at their level of how they operated their agency of state police. And one of the things they did was to cut a complete range called, I think, first sergeants out of the whole state police department, that they didn't need that mid-management level, and they saved about $2 million in their budget, and that meant that the money was saved on those positions. It also meant that we didn't cut out the state troopers who need to be out there helping us on the highway with accidents and investigations and other things. The other agency that did that and did it very well was the AFS, which is basically the welfare department. We needed those caseworkers to really help people get off of welfare and help them with job training and their family problems. And so they looked at their agency and they cut, as I remember, about 150 employees out of that agency. They were all managers or mid-managers. None of them were the caseworkers who helped solve the problems for people at the local level. So I think we can do that job better, and I like your suggestion, and we're working to try to make that happen. Let me ask a second comment out of Medford. Something else you might like to comment on state and local government spending?
How about first comment out of Medford?
I'm sorry.
And we have an opinion down here that we agree with the lady up in Hillsboro that there is too much administration and overhead in state government. We also feel the same way in city government. But the comment is mainly too much administration at the top level, not necessarily at the middle management level. We also feel that there are certain things the state can do to improve how it procures its facilities and supplies and vehicles, because there seems to be an awful lot of money spent there that may not necessarily need to be spent. We further feel that the state should take a look at when changes are made, and they really have to be made in state government. Oftentimes, organizational or administrative changes are made simply to satisfy a new administrator or a change in philosophy, and may not necessarily be really improving the way the state operates or does business. And then a final concern is that is whether or not the state is really getting local citizens involved in the decision-making process when something is done at a local level. An example given of this is in the White City area outside of Medford. There was about $500,000 spent in lottery funds to build a road in an industrial park that goes nowhere. And there appeared not be a lot of citizen input on that road.
You know, one of the most difficult things I think we have in government is when we're working with a community from state government to a local community, we go to the local governments, to the cities and the counties and the local business groups who are there as part of that decision making in that community, as we work on issues like economic development and where we invest our dollars to help that community build new jobs. And sometimes that will go through a lot of work with the local community and all of its governments and all of its local decision-making groups, and then it will come out and it'll be a brand new issue with the citizens in that area. So I think part of that means as we work with local government to talk about how we can help, local government should then be at the same time informing their citizens about the work they're doing with state government. Maybe then when we get done, everybody would arrive at the same place at the same time. I think that would help a lot. The administration issue I think I dealt with in the previous question, so I don't think I'll comment on that further, but we are really looking at trying to make certain that we don't spend so much on the administrative process that we don't have anything left for the line service worker who delivers the service. And I think the one more thing I would tell you is sometimes we make administrative changes because we're trying to look for better ways to manage, just as business is looking for better ways to manage, so is government looking for better ways to manage. Let me see if I can now take your second question briefly from Medford. We need to move on, but I'll talk more shortly if you'll help me with a quick one here, Medford.
Cindy Parks, and another area we looked at was the difference between state, local, and county taxes. People felt the closer they were to their government, the more control they had over spending and the more efficiently money was spent. So it became less efficient and less clear at a state level. The other issue that was brought up was that when there is citizen involvement in spending, such as advisory committees and county commissions and things like that, people feel they have more control over the spending of government monies wisely because they're actually involved in the choosing of which grants to award and that kind of thing.
Absolutely, and I think that's the reason the groups like the Youth and Juvenile Services Commissions and the Regional Strategies Program that involve people at that local level to help us make decisions have worked so well. I don't think there's any question that, you know, that the more people feel part of something, the more comfortable they are. Obviously, you understand your local government better because it's much closer to you in many cases. It's a little harder to understand the state government because it's a little bit more removed, and very hard to understand the federal government because it's very removed from most of us. So I think we feel most comfortable with what we know best, and we've got to do a better job in state government of helping you understand what we do. Let me move now to Klamath Falls and see if they can tell us how well state and local government is spending their tax dollars.
Hello, Barbara. This is Pat Donart from Klamath Falls. We've decided that we've come to the consensus that we believe state and local governments run fair to poor. We believe that the fundamentals and the infrastructure is good as far as the roads and the services provided by the state and education and police. But we felt that your answer earlier pretty much says what we feel is that we need to flatten out government. We have to watch the waste and consolidate services and promote bureaucracies to instead of being self-promoting and self-perpetuating, but to learn to cut their waste and fat. Also, a concern was the fact that the school districts or schools and education will be getting a bigger bite of our tax dollars in the coming years because of Measure 5. We believe that real look at consolidation and waste there would warrant your attention.
Let me ask you a follow-up question just to help me get a sense of consolidation and how you might feel in the Klamath Falls area. If I remember correctly, you have both the Klamath Falls City District and the Klamath Falls County District. I don't know how they overlap or whether they overlap. Is that the kind of consolidation you're talking about, putting two districts like that together?
Exactly, Barbara. We have two districts that, we have three districts. We have a high school, an elementary in the city, and then we have the county school district.
Okay.
To consolidate them to one Klamath County School District or Klamath District would save thousands of dollars.
Okay, that's an interesting suggestion. I bet it'll cause some discussion when we get off the air. Well, let me give you a little sense here of how I'm feeling right at this minute. I heard what I expected to hear, which was a lot of frustration. I think people are frustrated. They're looking for efficiency and accountability and cost savings and a little less administration and a lot more efficiency. So we need to look hard at how we do our job in government. I heard some things we do positively. People felt pretty good about the highway system. They generally feel pretty good about parks. They feel good about how the police systems are working, but there's some areas they have concerns. So what I'd like to do for the next few minutes is to look at how government works. I'm going to share some information that will give a background for the next two questions that I'm going to ask you to consider. I'm going to run through some charts with you about how government raises its money now and the services that those taxes and fees pay for, basically how the money comes in and how the money goes out. So if the facilitators will pass out the charts right now and hand them out to the people in the room, and as those charts are being passed out, I want to show you how Oregon compares to other states in taxing its people here in Oregon. There is a chart here, chart H marked on mine, state and local government taxes per person. Now these are local and state taxes. These are the 50 states in the nation, and last year Oregon was 21 out of the 50 states in terms of the level of taxation per person, state and local government. So we were pretty close to the middle nationally. Over the next 5 years, as Measure 5 phases in for 5 years, when we get to the end of that 5 years, Oregon will be 39th out of the 50 states in terms of how we rate in terms of the per-person taxation for Oregon. So we'll move from 21 to 39 over the next 5 years if we don't change our tax structure. Gives you a sense of how we look on a nationwide basis. Now what you have here in Card A is state government at the top and local government at the bottom. I'm going to take a couple of minutes and give you a sense of how we raise the money, where it comes from in state and local government. Basically, state government is about 51% of the money that you spend in state and local government taxes, and local government's about 49%. So if you looked here, you'd see personal income tax, and it's a very large portion of what we raise for state government. Then the corporate taxes are amount below that. Other taxes here might be liquor tax and cigarette tax, that kind of thing, a small amount of inheritance tax in Oregon. Then here's the lottery. You can see that we talk about it as a big dollar. Why don't we solve everything with a lottery? I think you can see why we don't. It's really a very small part of state government. And here's the highway fund. This is the gas taxes you pay. This is the truck taxes and other things that make up the highway fund. That's basically where state government gets its money. Down here at the local government level, almost all of the money for local government is raised through property taxes. Owner-occupied house, the homeowner living in their own home, the rental properties, residential rental properties here, and here the business properties. This is basically the industrial, the commercial, the other kinds of business operations. And the rest of local government's money is raised with a few other local taxes and fees. Might be hotel, motel taxes, it might be parking meters in some larger cities, that kind of thing that raises the money at the local level. So that's basically where it comes from. Now let me see if I can give you a sense of where it goes. This is the hard part. This is Card B, and this is basically talking about the state general fund. You'll hear that term a lot when people talk about budgets at the state level, the state general fund. Basically, the state general fund is all of those personal income taxes that you pay, the corporation's income taxes, corporate income taxes, and other taxes. Remember I told you that was like the liquor taxes, cigarette tax, that kind of thing. All of those monies from here up are basically the state general fund. And those are used for the purposes you see here on the right-hand side. The human resources, that's like mental health, that is the public health department at the state level. It's disabled children, it's senior citizen services, it's mental health services, the human resources needs. Here next is another pretty large wedge here, and this is kindergarten through the 12th grade. This is your local elementary schools and your local high schools. This is the portion the state was spending to send to your local schools. Next is higher education, our 4-year higher education institutions, universities, and college around Oregon. Next are the community colleges, and those are in a lot of communities in Oregon. The other education basically means things like the educational service districts at the county level. Public safety here in the state government means basically state police and the prison system. And then you see other services. Other services is a very broad scope of thing. Let me give you a sense of a few of the things that are in that. It would include natural resources agencies like forestry. It would include the governor's office. It would include the legislature. It would include a number of services that don't fit into any of these other categories, including the court system. So that gives you a sense of where these general funds are spent on general services. So that gives you a little sense of how that's spent. Now, let me go to the next chart here. This is Card C, and this is a new kind of state money I want to talk to you about. It's something called dedicated funds. A dedicated fund is something that is dedicated to a purpose and can't be used for other things. It might be dedicated by the Oregon Constitution. It might be dedicated because the federal government says we're sending you money you can't spend on anything else. It might be dedicated because a current law says it can't be spent for anything else. The lottery is a dedicated fund. When the people passed the lottery on the ballot in 1984, they dedicated it to economic development. So here you see this expenditures coming out of the Economic Development Fund going to economic development all around the state to help with economic development. Here is prison construction. The court ruled that economic development included prison construction and higher education building construction. And then here's the administrative cost and the prizes, the other things that are part. So here's a dedicated fund. And these lottery dollars can be spent this way, but they can't be spent up here for the state police. They can't be spent up here for disabled children or for mental health needs or abused children. Can only be spent for this purpose, dedicated fund. Now here's another dedicated fund I want to talk about on Card D. This is the highway fund. These are the taxes you pay when you go in and fill up your car with gasoline. It's what the trucks pay for doing that and other costs that are charged against the trucks that use our highway. The highway fund is used for 3 things: county roads, city streets, and state highways and freeways. We maintain them, we build them, We repair them, and we build the bridges, other kinds of things that are part of this process. These highway funds, you notice, a pretty large portion of the state budget. But when you look at the whole money that says this is all of the state budget, people say, wow, that's a lot of money. But I can't come down here and take some money currently out of this because the Constitution says I cannot, and use it to solve a problem up here for forestry research or agricultural development or any of the needs that might be up here. I can't do that because these are dedicated by the Constitution to the highway. So when people stir these two pots together, you get a lot of confusion. So it's important to understand what dedicated funds mean. Now moving along to Card E, here we are now back at the local level. Remember I told you mostly raised with property taxes. Let me show you how those property taxes are spent. A very large portion are spent on elementary and secondary schools. That's grade schools and high schools. So you remember, you saw up here in the general fund there was money for education. Part of it's paid here and part's paid at the local level through property taxes. The community colleges, same thing. Some from the general fund up here in the state, the rest down here with local property taxes. It funds the cities of the state. So at your local city, you get police and fire and 911 and parks and libraries and other things that may be funded at your city level. Funds county government, so you get public health and mental health at the local level, your local sheriff and jails. Some of the roads at the local level may come out of this. So the services of county government are here. And then finally, the special districts. And those are fire districts, and sometimes they're park districts. They might be soil and water conservation districts. Another part of the property tax expenditure out of this amount you've seen over here. Now, moving along to Card F, remember I told you there was a small amount here at the bottom that wasn't property taxes at the local government. Basically, those are parking fees, they are hotel motel taxes, they might be a business licensing fee at the local level. It's basically a small portion, but noted that it is split between cities, counties, and special districts. So that basically tells you where the money is spent in terms of the level of government. Now, Card G is a little bit different view of a change in our tax structure, which is basically the first major change in Oregon's tax structure in decades. This was a change created when Ballot Measure 5 passed. Now, as Ballot Measure 5 goes into effect, the schools and the community colleges, now paid for at the community college level, at the local level for the most part on property taxes, as more of those property taxes go away from you locally over the 5-year period, the state will pick up the cost for schools and community colleges at the state level. Well, the state budgets on 2-year budget cycles are called bienniums. Back in 1989 and 91, that 2-year period, here was your state budget. And all of this green here indicated the money that was spent on state services. Those are the things we do in state government. Remember, the human resources and the higher education and the natural resources, those kinds of things, prisons. And here was the wedge out of this pie that was spent on local governments and community colleges. In the 91-93 budget period, that's the period we're in right now, the one this legislature put together in the last legislative session, you will begin to see the impact of Ballot Measure 5 as a local school and community college commitment grows larger. It was the $550 million we picked up in local property taxes and paid for at the state, and as there begins to be a diminishing in the amount of money for state services for other kinds of needs. By the time you get to 93-95, you begin to see a real difference. As state and locals, as local schools and community colleges pick up a larger and larger part of the state budget, and without any tax changes that will indeed occur, and as state services begin to be seriously diminished. So you begin to see the effect over these 3 biennium. If we don't change our tax structure and we get to the 1995-97 budget year, this will be what your state budget will look like. There will be this small remaining amount that is left for all of the services of state government, and local schools and community colleges will get all of the rest. This will be what has been picked up off of your local property tax commitment, now paid for by state government. It will leave this amount here and this only in state government for everything else: human resources, natural resources, safety, courts, prisons, state police, senior citizen services, everything else, higher education, everything that's left in state government. So that gives you a sense of the change from here to here as ballot measure 5 changes our Oregon tax structure. That final chart that we just looked at goes up, as you remember, to 1997. And of course, we've only estimated the dollar figures for those future years. We can't know for sure yet. But even if things change, say our economy is stronger than expected, that would be good. But even if it was, we know that the school and education costs will definitely take a bigger share of the state's general fund budget, as the chart in front of you shows. That will leave a much smaller share of the general fund budget for services like help for disabled children in the state police and prisons and state parks, services for the elderly and higher education and mental health, and other important state programs. I am working now to save money and make government more efficient. I'm examining every level of government service. Nothing is sacred. But even if I cut administrative costs, even if I cut out duplication and overlap and waste, I cannot save enough money to keep offering the same level of services we now provide. The shift of education costs to the state just takes too large a share of the budget to make up the difference with efficiencies only. Now, I think Oregon's tax system is outdated. It needs to be restructured. It needs to be more equitable and more fair. But before we can talk about our tax system, we need to understand the services government provides and agree upon a level of service. So my next question is, what level of government services do you want? Do you want more services, the same level of services, or fewer government services? And after you've discussed the level of services you want, then I'd like you to discuss how we provide them. If you want fewer services, we're on that track now. That will happen. But if you want basically the same level of services or more, we're going to have to make some changes. As a way to discuss the overall level of services you want, I'd like you to start by discussing specific services and how you feel about them. You'll be handed a list of services and asked to circle whether state government should spend more or less or about the same amount of money on those services. Now, let me be clear. The list is a simplification of something that is very complex, and I understand that. I just want your first gut reaction. You don't have to hand it in. It's not scientific. It's just to get us started. So again, for the next 35 minutes, I would like you to please discuss government spending and the overall level of services you want from government and how to provide them. So I'll see you in 35 minutes.
Restructure the tax system to provide more money. Those are some possibilities. Want to talk about those for a minute? We got this impression already that you're all interested in increased efficiency.
I don't even know if it's provide more money. I think it's provide money in a different proportion than the way it is being now. Isn't that when you reshuffle taxes?
Are you talking about the spending
you're talking
or
about
the collection?
fairness?
Yeah.
Fairness.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think we're more reshuffling than.
What would you shuffle?
I'm not talking about reshuffling the programs here. I'm talking about reshuffling how that money is raised. And she's probably kind of come to that very soon, I'm sure.
So reduce one tax but raise or institute another.
Well, you can, if the, what
Well,
she
you
is
could
saying is being created because of ballot measure 5, we all know where this is leading, right?
But for instance, you could graduate the income tax more than it's done here, because at a very low level of income, everybody in the state pays the same percentage. That's the end of the graduation, isn't that right? And it comes pretty fast. You could
But the
change
problem
that.
is the base above that percentage is too minimal. I mean, it starts to climb so disproportionately. I mean, you have, I think the state has 35 millionaires or something like that, and yet you have probably close to 750,000 people underneath the poverty level in the Tri-County area alone. So, I mean, it goes up pretty sharply. You couldn't make up from taxing $100,000 up, increasing that. I don't think you could tax enough to make up for any shortfalls in property taxes if you dropped it down, drop property taxes down. So it has to be spread out. I mean, it's going to have to be fairly spread out over the entire population. population.
Seems like corporate and business taxes are a pretty small share here. I'd be willing to increase them a little. I'm real close to being an anarchist in this group, so.
Well, I would like to make a comment about Card H. I would just ask you to look at Card H and say now, and forgive me for harping on education, but I do think it's one of our saviors. Do we want to have an educational system like South Carolina, Louisiana, Alabama, Arkansas, Mississippi? Is that what you really want to have in this state? No, I think that's disgraceful. I'd much rather be back up there 21, associating with Arizona, Nevada, and Virginia.
You know,
not because Virginia's my home state.
I mean, listen, I must say, I share your general impression that in some ways Card H is the most striking card in this stack. I mean, I look at the left-hand column and walk away saying, gee, we are not being hideously overtaxed. I could imagine that in line with a number of the suggestions people have made around the table, I mean, we could be bumped down that list a couple of positions by means of greater efficiencies here or there. But now just echoing you, if the cost we pay of moving down that list is following the lead of the states you just mentioned, I mean, Louisiana, et cetera, then that's a disaster. And I mean, the conclusion I draw is that we're not overtaxed, we're not overtaxed. At the same time, I happen to believe that we were being taxed in some strange ways, such that we just were not being taxed fairly. It strikes me as bizarre to tax somebody according to the value of their property. I mean, that's...
Well, that's where it comes back, where it says not that it's more money, it has to be, you know, redistributed or raised in a different fashion that's more equitable.
Used more effectively.
Yeah, and used more effectively. I think it's a two-sided.
You are aware Nebraska only taxes property. There's no income tax, and they're number 27.
But Nebraska doesn't have any services, do they?
Oh, they have a wonderful medical big snowplows.
When was the last time somebody went to Nebraska for their vacation?
But listen,
Lots of folks come to Oregon, you know, for vacation. And
well, once you determine what you
have a border tax.
Yeah.
You have to pay a certain fee to get into the
Because
state.
people didn't want both the income and the sales tax.
Sales tax has been dedicated, for example, to
Yes.
education,
Right.
and that alone.
You can't have all.
Well,
You can't have all.
remember they had that one tax on the ballot where we got to tax people who just kind of like drifted through the state?
That's the sales tax.
No. There was one that was a tour, like a tourism tax. And people defeated that one too. I thought that was great. I thought that was like absolutely taxation with no representation. You should travel through and get taxed.
Well, our luxury tax is something of that sort now.
Yeah, they'd still
It's
come.
important.
What would the sales tax be if it was a dedicated tax to education? What percent?
I have no idea.
Has anybody ever heard a number?
No, but it wasn't presented that way, and that was one of the reasons I think it was defeated, because it wasn't dedicated, it wasn't understood to be dedicated.
But
May
then
I
they
say
say
something
Multnomah
about-
County, that would be like, that's 2/3 of our tax bill, at least, right? Is education.
Did the
Yes.
question change up there?
Yes, it did.
Yeah.
You're very observant.
Yeah, that's the next
It
one.
moved
Is
down
there-
to the tax question.
I would love to, if we could do this again in 3 months after getting the information that we need to make these decisions.
You were wrong, it just now changed.
I mean, I don't know.
I thought it was what
Again,
level now?
no, this is the third time.
This is the third time, okay.
Provide fewer services.
These are basically options that she's presenting and saying, which one or combinations of more than one do you favor?
Yeah, 2 and 3.
I think you start with restructuring the system.
This Card H doesn't really speak to how our taxes are allocated in reference to other states. I talked to somebody 3 weeks ago that moved here from Hawaii, had a $450,000 house there, was paying $1,500 in property tax annually. And he said if he'd done his homework, he would have never moved here. He was totally appalled at what his tax bill was. And he had a less expensive house here. So I think
But that's quite striking if you look at where Hawaii is on the list. According to this list, his taxes plummeted. He's maybe paying more in property taxes, but he must be paying a heck of a lot less
maybe there's a
elsewhere.
tourism tax that they get the tourists coming in.
Well, they have a sales tax.
They have a very high tourism
Sales tax,
tax.
yeah,
Extremely high.
People that are really buying things.
Well,
Japanese.
not only the local population, but all their tourists, that would bring in a lot of sales tax money.
And probably a lot of these down here have sales tax too.
But of course, the sales tax varies considerably depending on what's exempted from it and what the percentage is.
Well, I'm not going to be able to live in my family's house much longer. I see these California license plates on BMWs and stuff coming up and down the street, kind of eyeing my house, wondering when's the tax going to get so high he has to move out.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it just, I mean, it's getting to the point that this house, my parents have lived in, I'm fifth generation, and all 5 generations have lived in the same neighborhood since 1850 something. I'm going to have to leave. I can't afford to live in the neighborhood I grew up in, and it's not because
Nice to know you're rich.
I can't afford to live there, and I don't think that's equitable.
Since our tax statements came out, 2 sales signs have gone up in our neighborhood, and they're single women living alone and having to support themselves. And I don't think they can do it with this increase. I mean, mine went up $600, so for someone that theirs went down, I'm not happy with mine.
I think that's
Did
true.
everyone go up?
No, hers went down, that's what.
How'd you do that?
Yeah.
I voted against 5.
Mine went down to $120.
Yeah, mine went down by about the same amount. I was mystified.
Was
Mine
last
went
year,
up.
did you have your sewage bill included in your taxes last year, or was it separate? Because some districts are different.
No, that was
We
included.
thought we had a reduction. We got really excited, and we got our sewer bill yesterday.
Oh.
And we have never had a separate sewer bill
Yeah.
before. It's been included on the tax statement. And we multiply that by 6, because it's only for 2 months, and we went up.
Yeah.
So I would
hadn't thought of
suggest
that.
you look at your sewer bill, too.
You know, when you
Have
talk
you gotten your
about,
sewer bill yet, Mary?
I've never heard of a sewer bill separate.
It's the first year we've ever had a separate one.
You might be right, Jack. I could be in
Willing to
trouble. I
pay
could
more
be
than-
celebrating.
Yeah, she's willing to pay more. Well, that's
Yeah,
good.
I am.
Yeah, my sewer
I am.
bill.
No, I'm not gonna pay your taxes, but I am willing to pay mine.
What's his second question?
I'm willing to pay mine.
Looking at those up there, can I ask you now, how many of you favor a combination of 2 and 3?
I think there's a fourth aspect, and that's to
12.
make it more rational, who you collect from and how much. I mean, what variables do you look at? Do you look at the value of the house? Or do you look at people who are already receiving services that would indicate that they're destitute, like the lady with the retarded child who's working as a secretary at the law firm, who has to pay for daycare from 3 to 7 for her 8-year-old daughter, who can't afford property taxes, period.
Aren't you basically talking about restructuring?
I'm talking about restructuring, not just to provide more money, but also to inject more, quote, fairness,
Right,
unquote.
right, just restructure it, right.
Restructure.
Whole tax system,
Very little, no.
not with just the proviso that we'll
Yeah,
give more money, but that would be fair.
yeah.
I think there's something else in there. I don't know what it is.
Okay.
Just get that vote on the first time.
Welcome back. I'd like to start now with your discussion about the level of services. What did you talk about, and do you have some specific services that we should spend more money on, or specific services we should spend less on, or some services we should just keep about the same? Could you give me some examples? Let me start by hearing from these sites, and let me list them quickly for you. Oregon City and Clackamas Community College, Portland Community College Station Number 1. I want to make sure I get it right. It's Station Number 1. And in Roseburg, Umpqua Community College, down in Newport, the Hatfield Marine Science Center, and over to Prairie City at their high school. So let's hear from people at each of those sites. What services should we spend less on, more on, or spend about the same? Oregon City, can you give me a couple of examples there from Oregon City?
This is Frank Beswick speaking. Some of the things that we suggested, that there was quite a wide variety of opinion here, but a number of people wanted less in areas of employment, training, some for small business development. Mass transit was questioned, whether we get the money that we're due for this. Others wanted more in some areas. Tourism and state marketing was one that was listed as less. Some felt that we should have less money spent on police courts and jails, prisons, courts and jails, feeling that certain social efforts would reduce the number of prisoners and the need for jails and courts.
Well, that's a really interesting combination. The only one I'm a little bit surprised about, I'm surprised to hear the one on job training. One of the things that we've found with job training, not only does it help people become employed who might, for instance, be on welfare now, and to get them off of welfare, it helps people who've lost their jobs, say in the timber industry, to find a new kind of employment. So I'm a little bit surprised about that one. Anything else from Oregon City you think might help us get a feel for what you're thinking there?
Well, the point on job training, I think, was that we feel that the schools should be providing that service. The point's well taken about retraining of lumber industry.
Okay, thanks very much. Let's move now over to PCC. I think it's station number 1 I mentioned. Can we go there and hear about what you were thinking about, some specifics on services and the level of those services?
Yeah, this is Jim Liston. We had, our vote was 1 wanted more services, 13 wanted less services, and 7 wanted the same services. Basically, the comments were being made, I believe, that there was a great frustration in the overlap of services between different levels of government, that there was a great deal of that, and it should be looked into. Also, that basically with the Proposition 5 that was passed, the idea was to try and get some of the strain off the property tax levels, and the very first thing that happens is the government comes along and raises the values of homes, defeating the idea of getting less property taxes. So they're frustrated there. And finally, my personal point is that the taxpayers on a national average work about 5.5 months to 6 months for nothing but taxes nationwide on all your taxes, and the federal government wants more taxes. Now the state's going to want more taxes. We work very hard for this money, and we should have the right to be able to do a little bit better spending of it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, and one of the things that you mentioned that I think is important is you look at how many months that we work as workers that go directly to taxes before, in a sense, before we really have money of our own. Part of that, obviously, is the federal tax structure, and they don't have to operate like we in government do. They don't have to operate within a budget like local government does and state government does. So that really adds to our burden of taxation to have a government that can spend without any requirement to balance. And I think that really creates an additional load that we all pay for, and it complicates our trying to do any efficiency here in terms of the tax load we feel. I think that's really important. Any specific services that were mentioned there that people thought we needed more of, or that we needed to spend specifically less money on? Can you give me an example quickly?
Hold on.
This is George Blakey.
Yeah.
We were frustrated here in Portland by having too little information. I have no idea how much money is spent for these services in dollar amounts or even percentage amounts. So I can't make a decision really on what, should there be more or less. I don't know how much there is now.
Part of what we were trying to do is to kind of just get a gut reaction from people. Generally, people know, say, either they like prisons or they don't like prisons, or they think the education system's working or not. So we understood you were operating without all of the information you'd need to make an intelligent decision, but we were trying to get sort of a reaction from people to see where the sense of success or failure was on those service levels. So I understand your frustration. It wouldn't work in a Ways and Means Committee. Let me move now down to Roseburg, and can you comment now on the services and spending issues that we've been talking about? Some specifics from Roseburg.
Hi, this is Chris Poe in Roseburg, and overall we felt that the services provided have been are pretty good. We have a number of people that have lived in other states and like living in Oregon partly because of the services it provided. We do have some specific more or lesses, I guess.
Why don't you just give me
in the area of more, we thought, of course, being in Roseburg in the timber industry, we thought more employment and training. We're looking at a whole community that's faced with their way of life being changed, and a lot of people that need to find work, and it's not going to be in timber. More in courts, prisons, and jails. and more in higher education as well. I have a 6-year-old myself, and I despair of being able to send her to any kind of Oregon higher education institution. In terms of left, we thought environmental regulation and mass transit as well. We didn't know the government was paying for mass transit. We thought that mass transit riders should pay their own way.
Okay, and that's really an interesting variety. Interesting to see the difference between the Oregon City comments and the Roseburg comments. They were almost exactly reversed, and I think sometimes what we learn from this is, you know, the job training issue looks very different if you're sitting in Roseburg than it might if you're sitting, say, in Oregon City. And I think we learn from these opportunities to hear people from around the state. Now let's move to Newport, to the Hatfield Marine Science Center, and see what the comments are, some specifics maybe from there on the services and spending issue. Newport?
Now, this is Ed Bergerath, Barbara. In Lincoln County, people here want less, 3. Same, 6. And more, 1. And the more 1 said more efficiency, but the same. And the consensus of opinion then is maintain the same services with more efficiency. Restructure and increase the income tax equitably so that somebody who's earning $25,000 is not paying 10%, and somebody who's earning $100,000 is only paying 6% of his basic wage.
Okay. Can you give me any sense of a specific service that was mentioned in Newport that people might feel, well, you need more spent on or less spent on, something specifically? It would help us to get a sense of a specific down there.
We didn't talk about what was to be less.
Okay, thanks a lot. Let's move now to Prairie City. Can you comment to us about service and spending in terms of places we might be spending some more or less or about the same that you think are important?
We had 7 people who thought they should be the same, 2 less, and 4 more. And our summary was basically that we needed more efficiency. And we're concerned that the dedicated funds that were intended to be for education have been compromised, as in the lottery, the liquor, and the cigarette taxes. And we're concerned that money deemed for education will end up in other areas. And we felt that if the control of some of the services now being handled by the state were put into local government, we would have a better handle on these services.
Okay, now let me make a couple of comments. If I understood what you said correctly, the lottery, by a vote of the people, was dedicated to economic development. It was never dedicated to education. It was on the ballot, people voted for it, and it's dedicated to economic development. So it's important that as you maybe get a chance to take those charts and look at them and study them, that we understand where the dollars can be spent. There's no question the state is going to be spending more money on education, as you saw from your chart G, I think that was, where you see a larger and larger portion of the state budget being spent on exactly that. So we need to look at the combination between state and local government in terms of how we spend our money and still meet the needs that we want to meet. So thank you. Now what I want you to do is to look at the services, the level of services you want, basically whether you want the same level or more or fewer services. And what I'm going to just do for a few minutes is to ask for the results of the tally that you did. A couple of you did that early, but let me do it now. And how many of you felt generally we needed fewer services, the same level of services, or more services? So get ready, and I'm just going to call on you one at a time here real quickly. Chemeketa Community College in Salem, what was your tally?
John Ream in Chemeketa Community College in Salem. We have a tally of 7 for more, 6 for less, 14 for same, and 2 don't know.
Okay. Down in Roseburg at the Douglas ESD.
There's one of us, and we feel that the same. Good.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Lane Community College in Eugene, what have you got on the tally?
11 people here would like the same level of services. 1 wants more, and none want less.
Okay. And now we're going to go back to Portland, to Oregon Public Broadcasting Studio. Can you report in for us on your tally?
Yes, Portland, Oregon Public Broadcasting. We had 6 for fewer. We had 9 for the same, although one of those 9 said maybe a little bit more.
Okay. And now we're going to go to Corvallis, Oregon State University.
This is Bill Schaefer in Corvallis. We tallied ours a little different. We kind of just totaled up what was for more, same, and less, and we had 71 services more, 157 same, 40 less, and 15 don't know. And that's basically a tally of, let's see, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, about 12 people.
Okay, that's useful. We can figure that out. Okay, now to Vernonia High School in Vernonia. Can you give us a tally on your group?
This is Janae Dool in Vernonia. We had 5 for less and 1 for the same.
Okay, thank you. And over to Western Oregon State College in Monmouth.
Morris Johnson at Western Oregon State College. We had 4 for less, 3 for the same, and 1 for more.
Okay, thanks. And Prairie City High School.
We had 13 people, 7 were the same, 2 were less, and 4 were more.
Okay, thank you. And now to OIT in Klamath Falls.
Our feeling was 60% preferred about the same level of services and 40% wanted less.
Okay. Well, I think what you heard there generally is obviously some agreement and disagreement, but basically people wanted about the same level of services. That's where the majority came in, at least of those who reported in on the air. So I'd like to move now to the next question. We want the same level of services. If that's where we come out when we're through with this, you've seen some approaches there and had a chance to discuss them, whether you just go to fewer services, whether you increase efficiency, or whether you structure the tax system, or any combination of those, because we now know you can't get the same level of services without making a change. So let me go to Chemeketa Community College in Salem. How do we provide them?
Hello, this is Elaine Musso, and several of us felt that the information that you had on Card G was incorrect. We feel that our current property tax bills show that we will continue to pay more by way of higher assessments, which means that the state won't necessarily have to pay a great deal more to support education. We also want...
No, let me stop you. I don't want you to give incorrect information. Measure 5 required the state to pick up the local property taxes for schools and for community colleges as those costs were taken off of your cost at the local level. Even if your assessments go up, you still are going to be paying property tax, less property taxes than you were for those local schools and the local community college, and the state will pick those up. So the information is absolutely accurate. So, you know, that makes it hard because I don't want to give you incorrect information, and I don't want anyone to think the information is incorrect. But as you looked at it, if we were maintaining the same level of services, can you tell me whether you'd like to do it with fewer services, if that's the case, or whether you'd like to do it with more efficiency or with a change in the tax structure, or if you'd like to combine those options to try to reach that level of service? Are you still there?
Yes, I'm still here.
Okay.
We would like, first of all, more efficiency, and secondly, if there's a restructure that is necessary, then we'd like to see the restructure come in the income tax.
Okay.
We had several people saying that a flat income tax would make more sense, it would be more efficient, and also more fair to everybody than a sales tax.
Okay, thank you. Now let me go to Eastern Oregon State College in La Grande. What are you thinking over there in Eastern Oregon about how do we provide this level of same if that's where we end up when we're done? Are you there in La Grande, Eastern Oregon State College? I guess we don't have them right now. Let me go now to Eugene Tulane Educational Service District. How do we provide those same level of services out of the options that you had listed there in your last list?
Holcomb, Eugene.
Okay.
We decided fewer services, 4, increased government efficiency, 13, and restructuring the tax system and provide more money for 13.
Okay, thank you. Now let's go to Vernonia High School. Vernonia, are you
This
there?
is Ray Falk at Vernonia. I think the general consensus here was that we would like to see more efficiency, fewer services, and possibly go to an income tax, or sales tax structure similar to the state of Washington, with no income tax in Oregon.
Okay, thank you. That's the first time we've gotten that answer with a no income tax in Oregon and a sales tax. Thank you. Now to Cottage Grove High School. How do we provide the services of those options that you have there?
This is Cottage Grove High School. We would like to see more efficiency in government, and we would like to see it provided primarily by the income tax and with selected user fees and possibly a limited sales tax, but only on certain items.
Okay. Well, let me see if I can sum up what I've heard tonight. First of all, you've told me very clearly the government must do a better job, and I agree with that. You've also said that basically you want the same level of services. Over 56% of the people calling in tonight that we called on said that. And because we now understand that efficiency alone won't do the job if you're going to provide the same level of services, you said that you were also willing to consider restructuring Oregon's tax system. Now, interestingly, that's what I've heard from almost every group that we've worked with over the last 3 days on these shows. I want to thank you for coming tonight. This has been a really exciting opportunity for me and an exciting evening. I know that I didn't get to hear from all of you tonight, and I hope that the people who spoke did bring some of the points up that you agreed with and wanted to make. The input I get from you will be extremely important as we make decisions for Oregon's future. I hope you'll also fill out your questionnaires completely so that I can get your personal ideas. We're going to look at all of these and put them together, and I'll be reporting back to you in January so you'll understand completely what we heard from this series of meetings. When I began working on a conversation with Oregon, I told everyone that I wanted to invite Oregonians to join me in a great discussion about our future and to trust their guidance. Well, some skeptics didn't think much of that idea. They said citizens didn't care anymore and that they didn't understand government and that you wouldn't be able to help make decisions on anything this important and this complex. Well, they were obviously wrong, and tonight's discussion proves that. You're willing to get involved and you want to help build a future for this state. You've given hours of your time tonight to help us answer some really pressing questions. I expect a lot from Oregonians, and I've never been disappointed. I hope that you'll keep talking about these issues. They're important and they need your attention. So talk with your family and your friends and your neighbors and your coworkers. Oregon's future depends on this. Oregon's engaged in a great debate over the answers to the questions that I ask you tonight. And the more people get involved, the better. Only together will we decide what services our government should offer and how to provide them. Only together can we find the solutions. Thank you for being part of the solution. Good night. What I'm going to do is start by hearing from these sites. Let me name them so you'll be expecting them. Temecula Community College in Salem, Douglas Educational Service District in Roseburg, Eastern Oregon State College in La Grande, at Gresham Mountain Community College,